Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight, our Generation UCAN webinar. I'm Varun Sriram. For those of you that have joined us before, my voice may sound familiar. For those of you that are new, appreciate you taking some time out of your Thursday night to be with us today. And this isn't the only voice you're going to hear over the next 45 minutes or so. Joined by Rich Kalasky as well. Rich, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
Doing very well, and I think most of the folks in here probably know you a heck of a lot better than they know me. But for anyone who might be with us tonight who doesn't know who you are, give folks a little bit of a background on what you do, and maybe a little teaser on how you came about Generation UCAN and became familiar with it.
Okay. Well, there should be a good mix of people on here. Some of our Colfax Marathon ambassadors here in Denver should be on this webinar, as well as some of my clients. So I own a personal training and endurance coaching business called Overweight to Endurance Athlete, where after losing 160 pounds myself, I became involved in endurance sports. Part of my goal now is to help others overcome obesity and get involved in endurance sports. And the reason I came about Generation UCAN is after losing my weight, I wanted to look at a different fuel source that helped me in my marathons and my triathlons, and that's where I came upon Generation UCAN, and it's the sole nutrition product that I currently use in all of my training as well as competing.
Fantastic, Rich. So it's a good teaser, and we're certainly going to dive in as we talk a little bit more about nutrition overall and UCAN. We're going to dive in to some of your personal experiences with the product as well. But before we do that, I do want to get a sense of our audience here tonight just by asking you guys a couple quick questions. So for those of you that are at the computer and following along on your screen, the first thing that I want to pose to the group is find out how many times folks in here have used UCAN. So you do see the poll popping up on your screen, and you can feel free to vote. This will give us a little bit of a sense of, I guess, how deep we need to drill into some of the basic stuff, or if it's a crowd that's relatively familiar with it. So by the votes here, let's see. We look like you can see the results on your screen. It looks like a good majority of you have never used UCAN before, so that's nice. I appreciate all of you newbies joining us. The second, I guess, 2 to 5 times, there's a decent amount of people, and we've got some veteran users in here as well. So like I mentioned, this is really the idea. This is to be pretty interactive and for you guys to get any questions you may have answered. So the entire time, if you look at the questions tab on the GoToWebinar app, you can feel free to type any questions in there, and I'll make sure that we address every single question that's asked. So we'll really cater this to what you guys are interested in hearing about. And we do have some experienced UCAN users. So for any folks that do have a microphone, I may message you as we're going on in this privately and see if you'd like to come on and share your own experiences so we can hear from some other folks. I do want to ask one more question to the audience, and then we'll get right into it. And that one is, how many of you who are endurance athletes have some form of a weight loss or a body composition goal as part of your endurance sports? It's kind of interesting. I think the majority of folks that do get involved in marathon or half marathon these days are using it as a tool to get more fit. And as we'll talk about, a lot of the things that runners and endurance athletes have traditionally gravitated towards in terms of the sugars aren't exactly ideal for body composition, for fat burning, for weight loss. So if we can take a look at the results of this poll, it looks like about 2/3 of you do have some sort of weight loss or body composition goal. We'll call the other third of you maybe the lucky ones who don't. But so this is it's a good perspective. So let's dive right into it and talk a little both about what UCAN is, what makes it unique, and a little bit overall on just nutrition in general. So we'll start with UCAN. What's really unique about Generation UCAN is our carbohydrate. So we call it super starch. And in a moment, I'll get into a little bit about what super starch exactly is and some of the properties that make it unique. But the story behind super starch will give you a little bit of a sense of why it's truly unique and truly different. What you're seeing on the screen is Jonah. He's the son of one of our founders, and Jonah has a very rare blood sugar disease. So the way you and I sleep at night our livers convert stored carbohydrates or glycogen into glucose, also known as blood sugar, to give us energy and keep us stable and even throughout the night. So that's how the average individual sleeps. You could basically think of it like a glucose drip from your liver into your bloodstream, just steadily trickling in and keeping you steady throughout the night. Kids like Jonah have a genetic defect where they can't convert the stored carbohydrates into their liver into blood sugar to give them that energy. So in the 70s and 80s, these kids were dying at infancy because they would have extremely low blood sugar in the middle of the night, and this would often result in seizures or other dangerous episodes of hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar. In the 90s, they found that if they fed these kids regular cornstarch, the kind that you'd find at the grocery store, this would burn slower than other carbohydrates. It wouldn't overwhelm their livers, and it would keep their blood sugar stable for 2 hours at a time. Now, this was clearly better to the alternative, but as you can imagine, feeding your child 10 to 12 hours a day, to keep them stable for 2 hours at a time is a very stressful lifestyle for the parents. And Jonah's family actually was featured along with several other families around the country in a YouTube documentary called Life by the Clock, where you see the dilemmas of these families setting 8 to 10 alarm clocks throughout the day and a very stressful life, waking up 4 or 5 times in the middle of the night to feed their child. It's certainly not ideal. So Jonah's family, looking for a better way, started aggressively fundraising and spearheading research in the early 2000s, essentially looking for what they called the world's best carbohydrate. And when I say the world's best carbohydrate in the context of what they were looking for, it was a carbohydrate that burned slowly and would last for a very long period of time without needing frequent doses like the cornstarch that I mentioned. So they were looking for something they could give their son a significant dose of before he slept at night, and that would keep his energy and his blood sugar stable and even throughout the night so he could at least get that 8 hours of sleep. For 8 years, from 2000 to 2008, the top carbohydrate researchers in the world, they were looking at rices, tapiocas, barleys, wheats. They were basically looking at any carbohydrate source out there. And eventually they came upon what we now know as superstarch. And superstarch, like I mentioned again, that's the key ingredient in Generation UCAN. That's what makes the product completely unique. And we'll talk about a little more about UCAN in a moment, but let's talk about what that superstarch is. So the starting ingredient is non-GMO cornstarch. So similar to what Jonah was taking, initially, that cornstarch. When we say non-GMO, we mean non-genetically modified. Very important that it was that way because this is a carbohydrate that was being fed to infants. So it was very important that it was non-GMO. That non-GMO cornstarch goes through a very specific cooking process. Now, it's just cooked with heat and water over a 40-hour period, but that cooking process is really the key to making the carbohydrate unique. It basically elongates the carbohydrate so it breaks down slowly and trickles in very steadily to keep blood sugar and energy levels stable for a long period of time. Traditional carbohydrates will enter the system very quickly and overwhelm the system, like we talked about. For the average person, this certainly is not ideal. It can result in moods when you have up and down blood sugar. It can result in mood swings, energy swings, cravings for food, cravings for carbohydrates. Not necessarily life threatening, but for kids like Jonah, of course, that rapid entry of carbohydrate was life threatening. So the superstarch trickles in very slowly. It's a natural cooking process, just heat and water, no chemicals, no enzymes, non-GMO, like we mentioned. It's a gluten-free carbohydrate, and most importantly, it's clinically proven. Excuse me. So I think the one thing that people often wonder when they hear about this starch or this cornstarch is, how is this any different than what I'm going to the store and can purchase in bulk, for a fraction of the cost. And really that is the key difference, is that cooking process, which is patented by UCAN. That's what makes this carb completely different than anything else. So let's talk a little bit about the name Generation UCAN. Kind of how it came about was, we really looked at this as the third generation of carbohydrates. So if you look at a lot of the common sports nutrition products out there that you all as endurance athletes are very much in tune with, you have your first generation, your Gatorades, your Powerades, which have simple sugars, fructose, glucose, sucrose. You have your newer products, which like your Goos, your Hammer products, which use maltodextrin as their carbohydrate source. If you turn the label around on any of those, generally maltodextrin is one of the first ingredients you'll see on a lot of the newer endurance products. So what is maltodextrin? Maltodextrin, it's a complex carbohydrate, but it's essentially a sugar. The idea of maltodextrin as an improvement over simple sugars was really that it was a lot easier on the stomach. So the initial simple sugar based products, when they were consumed repeatedly, a lot of people were having GI issues with them. So maltodextrin came about as a carbohydrate that would be easier on people's stomachs. And the reason it's easier is the molecular weight, to get a little sciencey on you here, the molecular weight of a carbohydrate, how heavy the carbohydrate is and how large it is very much tied into how easy it is on your stomach. So the larger a molecule is, the faster it moves through your stomach. The small molecules, like simple sugars, are what sit in your stomach. They often draw water into your stomach and exert that pressure. So maltodextrin, being a larger molecule than the simple sugars, was certainly an improvement over that first generation of carbohydrates. So we refer to maltodextrin as the second generation of carbohydrate. But what's the disadvantage of fueling, consistently with maltodextrin? Well, it enters the system again very quickly. So we were talking about this in kids like Jonah, but even for the average individual, it's going to enter your system very quickly. It's going to cause a significant rise in your blood sugar, and the famous saying, "What goes up must come down." For most people, when you have a gel or something with maltodextrin, you get that rush, and then 30 to 40 minutes later, blood sugar plummets and you have to refuel. So that's kind of where that whole idea of taking the gel every 30 to 45 minutes evolved. It's because of what maltodextrin is doing to your blood sugar. But the other thing that, a spike in blood sugar causes, which we'll dive a little bit more into, is it really inhibits the body from burning fat to its full potential. And, I want to say that again because that's really significant. When you have a spike in your blood sugar, you aren't burning fat to your full potential during exercise. And as 2/3 of you weighed in, if you have a body composition and goal in mind, and you're exercising and fueling your body with something that's going to inhibit fat burn, well, right away, you're kind of making your exercise counterproductive in a lot of ways. So that's something very important to touch on, and it's something that we're going to talk about in more detail just in the next couple slides. So let's talk about this idea of blood sugar. It's something you're going to hear me talk about and mention a lot over the next 25, 30 minutes. And if there's really one takeaway here from today, I want you all to kind of understand the importance of keeping blood sugar stable and why you would want to do that. So steady blood sugar most easily can be translated into steady energy. And keeping your blood sugar stable, keeping your blood sugar steady is really, to sum it up in a nutshell, what UCAN is doing. So it's really a tool to keep your blood sugar stable. So if we look at the first part of this graph, what happens when we consume a sugar or even traditional carbohydrates that in foods that runners are used to having, the energy bar, the bagel, the banana, all of these things commonly thought of as great fuel sources for runners. These are all also going to spike your blood sugar. So it's kind of a counterintuitive to what you've probably always been taught as an endurance athlete. I mean, when you go to a race, what do you often see? Bagels and bananas. I mean, it's just very much ingrained in the culture of endurance sports. But again, really not an ideal fuel source for a lot of reasons. So when you have a spike in blood sugar, there's a couple things going on. We talked about the fact that you're blocking fat breakdown because the body says, I have all the sugar in my blood. Let me burn that excess sugar first instead of burning that fat. What's really tied into this as well is every time blood sugar rises, the body produces a hormone called insulin. So insulin has two functions in the body. One of the functions is to help get the excess sugar out of your system, but insulin is also one of the most sensitive hormones in the body, and it's a storage hormone that tells the body to store fat. So when we say block fat breakdown, what's happening from a science perspective and what's going on in your body is that you are causing the body to produce insulin, and when insulin's present at high levels, you are not going to burn fat to your full potential. Now, what happens when blood sugar drops significantly? That's sugar crash. Well, I think we've probably all experienced it. So, anecdotally, it's what a lot of you folks will refer to as bonking, as hitting the wall. You kind of feel that brain fog. A lot of that's tied into those significant swings and drops in blood sugar. So when a lot of times, 30 minutes into your run after taking the gel, when you start to feel fatigue or you start to feel hungry, that's really because blood sugar is dropping. So here's where UCAN kind of ties into this whole picture. Like I mentioned, the superstarch was originally created for Jonah to help with his blood sugar disease. And we really had no notion that this was going to be at all applicable for sports or fitness. So take you back about 5 years ago or 6 years ago now. It's early 2008. And, it's kind of started getting the inkling from some sports dietitians that this could be something that's good for sports, but we really didn't know what we had or where it would lead, what to do with it. So what we wanted to do was test superstarch, our carbohydrate, against maltodextrin, which, if you remember, is that second generation of carbohydrates that all the newer sports nutrition products were using. And basically, what we said is we're only going to go into sports nutrition if we can show that our carbohydrate is offering something significantly better than maltodextrin. Otherwise, there's no need of trying to compete with the thing that everybody else has if what we have is essentially the same. So we did a clinical trial at the University of Oklahoma on racing team cyclists, and they were hooked up to metabolic carts, intravenous blood draws, and they were testing a number of things. And the way the test was basically administered was it was double blinded, so they didn't know what they were ingesting, and the people administering the test didn't know what they were giving to the cyclists. And in one bout of exercise, they took the maltodextrin prior to getting on the bike for 3 hours, and they were at 70% VO2 max. And then they took another dose of maltodextrin right as they got off the bike. So they used that as their carbohydrate in the recovery window. Same deal with superstarch. In a separate time, they took the superstarch prior to getting on the bike, and they took the superstarch again post-workout right as they got off the bike. So let's just look at blood sugar. This is what we're looking at in this graph. The x-axis is time. The y-axis is blood sugar levels in the body. So as you see, they both start right around 100, which is roughly, or a little less than 100, roughly around baseline. And as you can see with the maltodextrin, you have that that significant spike in the first 30 minutes. And then, less than an hour into the exercise, there's a significant drop in blood sugar. With superstarch, what's pretty significant is that the spike is very minimal, but the decline is also very gradual. So if you were to look at the x-axis, even 2 hours later, you're right around baseline. So what that really is showing from an energy perspective is this is a fuel source that's going to keep your energy levels relatively stable during exercise for roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours without having you feel that big swing or that crash or that tail off. And even when the energy starts to dip below baseline, because it's happening so gradually, the thing that some of you who've used UCAN may be able to relate to is that you never experience that major, like, oh my gosh. I mean, when I say you never, of course, there's a variety of factors that come into play. If you're 6 or 8 hours into a triathlon, if you experience what you perceive to be bonking, I mean, that certainly UCAN's not magic, but from an energy standpoint, you're not experiencing that significant decline like you would with anything sugar based or with a gel. If we move on to the second graph, this is showing that hormone insulin in the body. So it's a little, if you just stay with me here as when we get through the science, then I'm happy to get to a lot of questions and talk, maybe in more practical terms. But this science aspect of it, it's pretty important to understanding what does make UCAN unique. So in this graph, what we're seeing, again, the red line's superstarch, blue line's maltodextrin. So you see that the cyclists ingest, again, at the beginning of the x-axis, they ingest both carbohydrates on separate occasions. And as we already saw with the blood sugar, with maltodextrin, when blood sugar rises, insulin is rising significantly as well. Meanwhile, with the red line, you're seeing that UCAN is virtually flatlining insulin, this fat storage hormone. Again, post workout, when they ingested the maltodextrin, you see insulin goes up again. So this is again, talking about fat burning in the post workout window, which is such an amazing time to burn fat. But when we have things like carb protein drinks that have a lot of fast acting carbs, or even something like chocolate milk with 15 to 20 grams of sugar, while you may be getting the benefits of protein for recovery, you're not maximizing the body's full potential to burn fat. So again, you see in the post workout window, to the right of that second green arrow, you see UCAN is again, the superstarch is flatlining insulin. So the final graph we'll look at is, this is the rate of fat oxidation in the body. So again, as you can see with the red line, the cyclists are burning more fat both during exercise as well as post exercise. And the key here again is they're doing so because their blood sugar is stable and because insulin is low. So after doing this clinical trial, this really is what pushed us into sports. And actually, a gentleman named Bob Siebehar, so a lot of you who are out in Colorado may be familiar with the name. He was the sports dietitian for the 2008 Olympic triathlon team in Beijing, and now has his own private business coaching athletes and doing nutrition coaching out in Colorado. But Bob was the guy that really pushed us into sports. He was one of the initial guys we contacted with some of this research, and Bob basically told us, if your carbohydrate does what these graphs show and what you say it does, this is going to completely change my profession. This is going to completely change sports nutrition. This is totally different than anything else is out there. So he said, let me try it myself. Let me put it to the test with my athletes, and let me see basically if what you have is for real. And once Bob came back to us and said, in fact, what you have is for real. This is having an amazing effect on my athletes' energy and really minimizing the number of calories they need to take in during their run, really help changing their body composition when they use it consistently over a prolonged period of training. That was pretty much what we needed to get into sports nutrition. So we launched in 2010, and then we've been around since then. One more point I want to talk about, and then I'll bring Rich in here for a little bit, is the idea of burning fat for fuel. So the 67% of you, the 2/3 of you who said you had a weight loss or body composition goal in mind, I think it's pretty evident to you folks why you'd want to burn fat for fuel, right? You're exercising, and burning fat is part of the reason you're exercising, and may even be part of the reason that you got into endurance sports in the first place. But what about that 1/3 of you who doesn't really care about burning fat from a weight loss or a body composition standpoint? Why the heck would you guys want to burn fat for fuel? Well, if we try to make sense of this chart here a little bit, what you'll see is that fat in even the leanest people is just an abundant fuel source. We've all got plenty of it. So even somebody, 3 to 5% body fat still has 150-pound male who's really, really low body fat percentage. Even they have 15 to 20,000 calories of stored fat that they can use for fuel. Meanwhile, the average person, can't really store more than 2,500 grams of carbohydrates. So fat's an exponentially more, it's much more abundant as a fuel source. We all have much more of it, even if we're very lean. So you want to be able to pull from a fuel source that you have more of. And another reason this is pretty important is, if you can stay with me again for a little bit while we dive into the science, the only thing that can feed glucose to your brain is your liver glycogen. And there's only 100 grams of liver glycogen that you can store at one time. Now, when you start depleting those limited carbohydrate stores because you're relying on just fueling with carbohydrates, your muscles are very selfish. So they're going to start pulling that glucose from your liver and trying to feed it into the muscles to fuel them. And what happens then? Well, that's when you start to feel that haziness, and so much of endurance sports is that drive, that motivation, that focus to keep yourself going. And when you start depleting your liver glycogen, it's very tough to have that same mental toughness and mental focus. So there's another benefit of burning fat from that standpoint. And finally, probably the most key benefit, I kind of buried the lead at the end, but a gram of fat will give you 9 calories of energy. A gram of carbohydrate will give you 4 calories of energy. So fat is actually an incredibly powerful fuel source. You're getting more energy when you're burning a gram of fat versus burning a gram of carbohydrate. So that's another, really significant aspect to why you would want to burn fat, even if you were purely focused on your performance rather than focused on your body composition. So the best performing athletes are generally very good fat burners. The ideal way to perform to your peak is to burn a combination of carbohydrates and fat, and UCAN really allows you to do that because of the unique scientific properties of it to a much greater nature than any other carbohydrate that exists. So, with all that said, Rich, I said a mouthful, but let's start with the body composition aspect of things. I know that off the top, you had mentioned that you lost a significant amount of weight prior to utilizing UCAN. What have you noticed in your body composition since the time you've been, really training exclusively, excuse me, with UCAN?
Well, I think to start, when we're all getting involved in sports, everything you read and you see has to do with these, energy drinks and gels and goos and blocks and whatnot. And one of the things I noticed almost immediately in my training was the GI issues. Where I had the GI upsets and what we call runner's trot, where you're 5, 6, 7 miles out, and all of a sudden you get the GI upset. When I switched over to UCAN, it was almost an immediate noticeable difference. I didn't have that GI upset. For me, energy levels were so much better. I didn't feel like I had to pop something every 45 minutes or every 4 to 5 miles. I felt like I could sustain longer training runs. And then I also noticed once I started with the Gen UCAN, I probably within the last 6 months of first starting it, I lost an additional 20 pounds. And those of us that are training and really into the body composition, before you work out, you weigh yourself. After you work out, you weigh yourself. And I was really noticing the difference of where I wasn't, gaining weight from training. And I still see that a lot in a lot of the Facebook groups from some of the triathlon groups, where you see people talking about, I'm training, training, training. I'm getting ready for peak race season, and I'm putting this weight on. So that's another reason why I really push the UCAN product too, is to help with the body composition and not put on some of that weight that we see during peak training.
And that was probably one of the most fascinating things to me, being relatively new in terms of working with and dealing with endurance athletes, is how much that comes into play of people who actually have gained weight, or struggle to simply just maintain their weight during training for a marathon or triathlon. I mean, I think from the outside looking in, if you were somebody that didn't realize the level that a lot of endurance athletes are over consuming sugars and carbs, you would naturally think that, oh yeah, of course, when people train for a marathon or a triathlon, they're going to lose weight. It just seems like the logical conclusion to come to before you really have an understanding of things. And at all these expos we've been at, I think I've heard that piece of feedback from so many athletes is, I just can't seem to figure out how to not gain weight when I'm training. In your experience, Rich, you've probably dealt with hundreds of more endurance athletes than I have. How prevalent is that? You find people do actually gain weight when they train.
Oh, I mean, I hear it all the time too. I've athletes that come to me when I start discussing this, that that's the first thing they say is I'm trying to figure out a way to either maintain or lose weight during training. I seem to always put the weight on. And again, some people assume that it's we're building muscle mass. Some of it is just the amount of actual processed sugars and carbs that they're putting in their body from other training products. So it's more prevalent than I would have thought as well.
So, I think as we're talking about weight loss, the one important thing that I want to mention and is that when you're thinking of using UCAN for weight loss, you really need to think of it as a tool for weight loss. So it's not the complete picture. It's not something that if you're sitting on the couch drinking UCAN, the pounds are going to magically melt off. It's not a gimmicky type of weight loss thing in that nature. But there are very strategic ways to use UCAN in your training. and some significant things that keeping blood sugar will affect, that will help, burning fat and losing weight come easier. I mean, it's not going to be easy. You still got to put in the work to train, but even if you look at this chart that we're looking at on the screen, for a typical 90-minute to 2 hour bout of training. And I apologize, actually, that the calorie count on the UCAN is slightly off. A packet has about 120 calories. Actually, it says 100 there, but for 90 minutes of training or 2 hours of training, a typical person will generally have, 120 calorie packet of UCAN 30 minutes prior to the workout, and that's really all the calories they need through their entire workout. Compare that to what you may do, if you're having, a lot of people, they may have an energy bar, as their pre-workout snack, and then sip on a sugar-based sports drink, which they perceive as they're doing it to hydrate them. But if you really look at the number of calories they're taking in, surrounding their workout, it's significantly higher. Even with gels, I've heard for a 2 hour period of exercise, I've heard a lot of people tell me, I take a gel 10 minutes before I start, and then and this might be more for racing than for in training, but I've certainly heard that 3 to 4 gels being consumed within a 2 hour workout. So UCAN's really going to allow you to significantly limit the number of calories you're consuming, during and before your workout without your performance suffering. And so why the biggest question we get, especially from triathletes, who are used to 200 to 300 calories an hour, in a lot of cases, they say, how the heck is my performance not going to suffer when I'm cutting my calories, in half or in a third? So there's really two aspects to this. Number one is because the calories in UCAN are very steadily released. They're much more efficient. You're not getting a big rush like 100 calories in a gel. Your body can't really even use all those calories for energy. So you're not getting that calorie dump, um, which is giving you calories you can't even really use. The second aspect is, we've always considered calories as what we consume, because with a lot of traditional sports nutrition, you're really relying on what you're consuming to fuel you. Now, as we talked about at length, as we went over with the science, with UCAN, you're not only consuming calories, you're also tapping into and using your internal calories to fuel you. So, it stands to reason when you are able to burn more fat and utilize more of your fat to give you energy, you don't need as many external calories. So you may see 120 calories from UCAN that's lasting you, X amount of time, but it's really the UCAN as well as your own stored fat that's helping fuel you through the workout. And I think a fascinating quote is the one you see on the bottom. I hear from Dr. Kathy Eckel, who says she researches the human metabolism at Yale, and she says it's really the ability to maintain blood sugar that sustains energy levels. So from a fitness standpoint, UCAN's huge because it does that without putting lots of calories on board. It's really beneficial because you can make every calorie count. So when we talk about
And
the idea of, go ahead, Rich.
I was just saying to add into that, one thing that I've heard, and then more I heard about it, I kind of considered it myself, is you get done with a 4, 5, 6 hour brick workout, you're exhausted, the rest of your day is shot. Especially when you're taking these products that you're spiking and crashing and spiking and crashing. And the one thing that I've heard and I've noticed myself is, because you're sustaining that blood sugar level, like you said, for the full time, you can get done with, a long run, a 13, 14, 15, 16, 20 mile run, or a 4, 5, 6 hour brick workout, and you can still, function for the rest of the day. You're not so exhausted because of those peaks and crashes all day long. You've had that sustained energy level. So it does make that bit of difference in your performance in your training too. You're not as fatigued and shot, where you can't get up the next day and function or function for the rest of that day either.
That's an interesting point. I was talking to a woman out in Texas a couple months ago, and she was telling me she's a mother of three, named Sally Castillo, and she was telling me that her kids used to hate when she trained for marathon because she'd go on her 16 to 18 mile run on a Saturday morning, and she'd come home and she'd be totally wiped out, like you just mentioned, the rest of the day. And she said that since she started using UCAN to fuel her runs, and it has been keeping her blood sugar stable and doesn't have that significant decline in blood sugar after her workout, she's able to, of course, her legs may be a little bit tired after the run. That's natural, but she doesn't just have that overall level of fatigue where she just can't get off the couch, you know. So she says that she's able to spend more time with her kids and still get the training in. So it's kind of made that nice balance where the training hasn't completely overtaken her life. You know, especially when there's other obligations, whether it's a family or whatever else everybody may have. The one aspect you talked about that we haven't really touched on yet at all is the idea of UCAN being easy on the stomach. So it's really twofold. One of the things which I think can be a logical conclusion based on what we're looking at is when you're putting less into your system, you know, especially over a long endurance event, you just have less that could potentially bother you. So there's kind of that aspect to it. You're not consuming as much, so there's not as much that could screw up your system. But the other thing is we talked a little bit about the molecular weight when we were talking about maltodextrin being an improvement over simple sugars. So now the superstarch is 5,000 times the molecular weight of maltodextrin, so a significantly larger molecule. Really, the best way I can describe the feeling, and Rich, you might have a better way with words on this than me, but it's almost you almost drink the UCAN and 10 minutes later you don't even feel it in your gut, and really what's happening is it passes through the stomach so rapidly and it's actually digested in the intestines, so you literally it gets in and out of your stomach so quickly that you don't even feel it in there. You don't have that heavy feeling. How do you try to describe though the way UCAN acts on your stomach? Is that kind of an accurate representation of what you feel?
Yeah, I kind of agree there. There may be Alex Ross. I don't know if he's on here. One of the ambassadors when he first started trying it, he even said he felt like it kind of curbed his appetite, like he didn't feel so hungry while he was out on longer runs training. So even when he was drinking it, he didn't feel that heavy gut or that heavy need to eat either.
So that's pretty interesting, and you know that. So a lot of that could be the way it's moving through his stomach quickly. Some of that also is, you know, when we were talking about declines in blood sugar. A lot of times, what happens when your blood sugar drops is your stomach isn't necessarily hungry, but it's almost a trigger to your brain. Like your brain tells you, "Oh man, my blood sugar is dropping. I feel like I need to eat." And I think one way to think about this is, you know, it's when you're eating pizza, for example, it's a heck of a lot easier to overconsume pizza and eat, you know, a couple slices too many than it is to overconsume chicken breast, you know, for example. And why is that? Well, part of it is, you know, when you're consuming those carbs and blood sugar is going up and down, you're getting that mental perception of, oh, I can keep eating, I'm still hungry, you know, even though physically your stomach is pretty stuffed. I don't know too many people who, you know, move through 4 or 5 chicken breasts like they can move through 4 or 5 slices of pizza. So a lot of that thing that I mean that's feedback that we get very commonly, Rich, and a lot of that I think is tied into the idea that when your blood sugar is stable, you know, you really just react to the physical hunger in your stomach rather than the mental triggers of hunger from your brain. A big thing that people are noticing, you know, and so we'll talk a little bit nuts and bolts about how exactly to use UCAN because we do have some new folks here. But a big thing that people are noticing when they use UCAN for a shorter workout. So, you know, myself, I'm much more inclined to, you know, run between 3 and 6 miles at a time. I'm not so much the Ironman guy or the marathon guy. So, you know, I'll do hill sprints or interval sprints on a treadmill or, you know, or go out and run 4 or 5 miles. And the big thing I really like about UCAN, which was always an issue for me previously, was even if I'm working out, you know, hard for 35 minutes to an hour, when I'm done with that workout, the product still stays with you. It's still keeping you stable. So I don't come home and have that ravenous post workout hunger like I'd get in the past. You know, I don't want to rip the fridge open and just chow down everything in sight. So really that idea of stability even post workout, if you're thinking about using UCAN for a shorter workout, that's really somewhere where if you have a body composition goal, it could benefit you. You know, even if you think practically you could come home and instead of just being totally wiped out and really ravenously hungry and trying to make a quicker, convenient choice, come home, take a shower, cook yourself a proper meal and eat, you know, 45 minutes to an hour later. And it's really setting you up to make better nutrition choices. And when we talk about UCAN as a weight loss tool, that's really such a big way to think about it. You know, UCAN is something because it keeps your blood sugar stable, it's setting you up to make better nutrition choices. So, you know, UCAN isn't the only thing that can keep your blood sugar stable, of course, but from a sports nutrition standpoint, there's really not much else out there that's going to keep your blood sugar stable for as long as UCAN will. So if you're looking for something, if you're on the go, or if it's post workout, or if you're busy at work and looking for something to drink in between meals, UCAN is really that ideal tool to use and implement anytime during the day where you feel like you might be prone to sugar cravings. So a lot of people will keep a packet at work and have it, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a lot of people that'll mix it in a breakfast shake as the carbohydrate portion of their breakfast shake. Adding some healthy fats and some protein to it. So really view UCAN as a tool to keep your blood sugar stable at whatever time of the day you would be prone to misses. A lot of folks use it, after dinner. If they're prone to late night snacking in front of the TV, I'd say most people who snack late at night are probably gravitating more towards the candy and chips than they are, healthy options. So that's really the way you want to think of it in terms of using it for weight loss. But let's get into specifically, the two versions of UCAN that are out there, and how you'd want to think about using both. So in the packets, we have packets and tubs, and for simplicity's sake, right now, I'm going to just refer to a serving as a packet. However, just to be clear, the serving size in the tubs is a little bit smaller. So for those of you who are veteran UCAN users, just know that a scoop and a half from a tub is equal to one packet. So hopefully that's not too confusing. But there's basically the two versions of UCAN. There's the sports drink mix, which is our super starch, carbohydrate, and electrolytes. So we've got 30 grams of super starch per packet. Each of those packets is about 120 calories. The thing about UCAN is, even though it's a drink, you really want to think of it as a pre-workout snack. So you're not sipping on it slowly over the course of your exercise. This is something that you want to dose with. So you're getting that full serving in you about 20 to 30 minutes before you exercise, and then you can simply hydrate with water or other sugar-free electrolytes during your exercise if you're a heavy sweater, or if it's very hot outside. So that's the way you want to use UCAN. 8 to 12 ounces of cold water per packet seems to be the sweet spot, just in terms of taste and consistency. Now, the amount of water you use has no bearing on how the product works. So, sometimes when I just want to chug it down and get out there and go, I'll just mix it pretty thick with like 4 or 5 ounces of water and just slug it back. So, water is completely, up to personal preference, but 8 to 12 is what we recommend. So the sports drink mix is ideal pre-workout, good for that 2 or 3 o'clock time in the middle of the day as a tool to keep blood sugar stable. And you can certainly use it as the carbohydrate portion of a meal replacement shake. So UCAN on its own probably isn't going to keep you full enough to be a true meal replacement. I mean, you could drink it and it could tide you over for a good 90 minutes or 2 hours if you're having it in between meals. But if you want to really use it as a meal, I would just suggest adding some protein and some healthy fats. So what a lot of folks will do, for example, is they'll take our lemonade UCAN, some Greek yogurt, some fresh berries, and blend it up into a smoothie. So that would be an option of using UCAN as a meal replacement shake. One packet in general we find lasts 90 minutes to 2 hours. So if you're exercising anything under 2 hours, that one packet should be all you need. Now, I realize a lot of you in here are endurance athletes, so a lot of you folks are exercising, for significantly longer than that. So our general rule of thumb is that for exercise over 2 hours, you want an additional packet roughly every 90 minutes. And here's how you want to think about this. Because UCAN isn't like a gel, it's not something that hits you rapidly. What you want to really figure out is whatever that first serving you're taking is, figure out how long it lasts you. So if you say that that first serving of UCAN is going to last me 2 hours, then you know that next serving should be taken 30 minutes before you need it. So that next serving should be taken at the 90-minute mark. Now, again, when you're taking the serving during a workout, it's, again, not something that you're nursing and sipping on over a 45-minute span. It's really something that you want to get into your system relatively quickly. And for this reason, a lot of runners, they'll actually carry it in a small gel flask and concentrate it so they can almost treat it like a gel and just slug it back quickly. But again, remember, it's a gel that's lasting them 90 minutes to 2 hours instead of 30 to 45 minutes. Rich, what do you do? You've done Ironmans before. You've done a lot of long events and used UCAN, how much of it do you find that you need?
Well, typically, if I do anything over 2 hours, I'll do in the morning. I'll put a scoop and a half in oatmeal, and with usually some peanut butter. I typically primarily use the protein enhanced version, and then I'll sip on a bottle, up before a long training run or competition. Right now, I have found kind of my sweet spot is probably a bottle with a scoop and a half in it every 75 to 90 minutes is kind of where I need to be right now. And that's just something that I found through, just through use of it in practice in training mode. I do use it sometimes during the day. I use it pretty much post workout as well. Carlos makes ice cream with it. Um, we've tried to put it in just about everything from Greek yogurt to, like I said, ice cream to some homemade protein bars that Carlos has made. We've put them in pancakes before too. So we just, we found different ways to get it in there, as well as getting a meal before training. And like I said, my sweet spot right now, I've noticed during training, is about every 75 to 90 minutes I consume a bottle. That usually has either, like you said, the packet or a scoop and a half from the tub.
So you mentioned the protein enhanced UCAN. So really, the key difference with the protein UCAN is just that it has protein added to it. So the UCAN with protein still has 30 grams of the superstarch, the same amount of the carbohydrate as the sports drink mix. Also has the same electrolyte content, sodium and potassium. So can certainly be used pre-workout. Like I mentioned, it's just got 100 extra calories because of that 13 grams of added protein. Um, so the times really that I would say you would want to use the protein UCAN, well, it's actually very much tied into personal preference. But from an energy standpoint, you really won't feel much of a difference. It's the protein is designed to prevent that feeling of hunger during a long workout. So when Rich says that, he's using the protein UCAN for his long endurance events, I mean, totally makes sense because at some point, you are gonna, when you're out there for 4, 5, 6+ hours, you are gonna start to feel hungry. And for many people, they just like to get all their calories in the form of liquid, just because it's for a lot of folks, they find it easier on the stomach. So it's really ideal. We have a lot of triathletes that kind of just use protein UCAN exclusively throughout, and then they don't need to worry about eating anything at all. They're both their hunger needs and their energy needs are met. So protein UCAN, it can be used pre-workout, it can be used during the workout. Certainly is beneficial for post-workout for in that recovery window. Like we talked about, the protein will help repair the muscles. The super starch will keep you stable and allow you to keep burning fat in that post-workout window. And I think, gosh, that's such an important time if you have a body composition goal to utilize UCAN because that's such an easy time to screw up your workout. That's the easiest time to be prone to craving. So if you can get something in your system right away after the workout that's going to keep you steady and kind of help you make those right choices instead of just reacting to that strong sensation of hunger that you're feeling, that's certainly going to help you not overconsume in that post workout window. The protein UCAN, it probably works better as a midday snack because it's got a little bit more substance to it. So it certainly can be used that way. And then, I use it almost every morning as part of a breakfast shake. I'll do either the chocolate or the vanilla with, 8 to 10 ounces of almond milk. If you're a soy milk fan, that's totally fine too. Do a tablespoon or two of peanut butter and then maybe about a half or about a third of a banana actually to try to keep the sugar to a minimum. So that's my breakfast almost every morning, and have that around 8:30 in the morning. Don't really worry about lunch until 12:30. So that's certainly a good way to use the UCAN with protein.
The protein version for me was basically, and I mean, when I first started using it, I didn't realize there was the difference, and so I bought the protein version of it, and that's what I started using when I was training. I did Austin Marathon in February. I did Boston in April, and I started right after Austin because I just didn't like the performance there, and like I said, I grabbed the protein version of it, and I almost immediately felt the difference, and in a month and a half, I cut off 25 minutes off my marathon race time. So that's kind of where I stuck to, and I guess like you said, it became a personal choice that was the one I wanted to use and felt better using it.
Got it. Okay, so that's always interesting to hear. how different individuals make that decision. And what you said is very true. I think what we're trying to do a better job of is educating people on the fact that they can use the protein you can, both prior to their workout and during their workout. I think, initially when people saw it was protein, they just assumed it was a recovery product. So, I think in the triathlon world, we're just seeing so much of that where people want the additional calories, where they're out there for so long, they need something that'll help keep hunger at bay. So it's truly a great option. So what I want to do is just run through a few of the questions you guys have posed and really just address a couple common things over the next 5 to 7 minutes that I'm sure maybe in people's minds that we always get asked. Before I do that, I just want to let you all know that as a 24-hour special, we really appreciate everybody giving up some of their night and joining us tonight. We are extending a 20% discount to everybody who is on here with us. So I will type the code that you can use at our online store. It's simply just O2EA, which is, for those of you that are familiar with Richard's coaching service, Overweight to Endurance Athlete, that's really what it is. And our online store, I'll also put that URL in there. It's generationucan.com/store. So if you enter in that code at checkout, it'll normally give you 10% off. But like I said, for the next 24 hours, you will get 20% off. And that'll apply to both the UCAN packets and the UCAN tub. So anything you see on the store will be eligible for that additional discount. So in terms of some of the common questions we get, folks often ask us during an endurance event, what else can I consume that's not going to throw off the effects of UCAN? And, I totally understand when you're out there for 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 hours, the body is going to crave and the mind's going to crave some variety. It's in now, could you get by on solely UCAN from an energy standpoint? Absolutely. But, there's theory and there's reality. So for the folks that don't want to just do only UCAN and need a bit of variety, what we generally say is the things you consume them with the thought of hunger in mind. So what generally satisfies hunger? It's not carbs, it's protein and fat. Carbohydrate is what you'd consume for energy, but UCAN is really going to take care of your energy needs. So things like snacking on nut butter, like the Justin's almond butter packets, those are pretty popular. I know a lot of folks do that. Any of the variety of low sugar protein bars, that would work completely fine. We have some ultra runners who have told us that they make their own homemade hummus wraps. Really, just what you want to try to avoid is consuming a lot of fast acting carbs or a lot of sugars, in between your doses of UCAN. And that's simply just because you're not going to get the best effect from the product. Because if you think about it, what are you doing with UCAN? You're keeping your system and your blood sugar very stable. What's the point of a gel? It's to give you that spike and give you that rapid hit of energy. So, you can't have it both ways. So once you start fueling with the gels, you're in a way you're locked into that method of fueling because you're going to have the significant up and the down. Now, if if you're taking a small swig of sports drink at an aid station and you're consuming, a few grams of sugar here and there, it's really not going to be the end of the world. So we just, I try to say some of this stuff just to get people thinking along the lines of don't consume UCAN and then just start consuming gels like crazy. That you just won't need it. It'll hurt you more than it helps you. So that's really what you want to think about doing in conjunction with UCAN. Rich, what have you tried? When you're out there for a long time, if you're like, I just need some variety from UCAN, what kind of things have you tried yourself?
And I've tried the waffles from Honey Stinger before. I use Justin's peanut butter packets. I've used the Pocket Fuel, which is kind of a peanut butter chia seed
Exactly. Yeah, Pocket Fuel. That
combination
was
as well
another
too.
one I wanted to mention. Yep, that's a common one amongst a lot of the folks that are using UCAN for long course stuff.
Yeah, I mean I've had to modify some of what I do as well because of the gluten issues that have arisen in my diet recently, as well as um, lactose. So I've got to kind of look at what products I use. We in Ironman Arizona back in November was the first time I actually tried and made a paste out of Genucan, and carried that in a Ziploc bag, both on the bike and run, just because you never know what's on a course. You never know how you're going to react to something that you may have never used before in training. And I've used GenUCAN in competition and in training, so I kind of hoped that if I had made this pace, that the pace would work, and it did. But there are other things out there. I mean, I've seen people still, feel like they have to consume, a Gatorade or some other type of sports drink that's out on a course, or Ironman has soda or soup broth. Just depends on what everybody still wants to try. I've spoken to a guy that uses GenUCAN primarily, but in special needs, he mixes soy sauce, sugar, and scrambled eggs, and that's what he keeps at his special needs bag to get. So, to each their own, I guess. But people try different things.
That's a I've heard I thought I'd heard everything, but you gave me something new right over there. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that when he told me that, it was definitely interesting. He gets the protein from the eggs, the sodium from the soy sauce, and sugar spike from the sugar he mixes in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so, one thing to mention too is like let's look at a marathon distance, for example. We have some folks that simply just would like to use UCAN, but because of the format it's currently in, and if they really don't like to carry anything with them, what a lot of folks will do is they'll at least use UCAN to carry them through the first half or the first 2/3 of the race, and then at that point, to get through the back end of the race, they may switch over to the sugars, or even in an Ironman, that people may use UCAN prior to the swim, and then throughout the bike, and then towards the end of the run or the middle of the run, they may switch over to sugar. So if you are going to switch over to the fast acting carbs or the simple sugars, it's what'll work best is if you can time it such that you're doing it towards the end of the race, because then from an energy standpoint or from a performance standpoint, you're not going to falter too much with the highs and lows in blood sugar. So you can kind of let the UCAN run its course, and then switch over to the other method of fueling. Now, in terms of, I just want to pose a couple strategies if you want to use UCAN for your longer stuff. So, like we mentioned, a packet generally lasts 90 minutes to 2 hours. So, let's look at a marathon, for example. During a marathon, what a lot of folks will do if they're using exclusively UCAN is they'll do a packet, either the protein or the UCAN without protein, 30 minutes before the race. And then at mile 10, they'll take another, depending on the individual and depending how they've trained, they'll take another half a packet to a packet at that point, usually, in a small gel flask mixed as a paste. They'll do the same thing around mile 17, that same half a packet to a packet, and then that's really all the fuel they need. So, depending on how much they take in, you're really looking at a full marathon on 240 to 360 calories, which is kind of unthinkable for some who, I've been told people are used to having 7 or 8 gels over the course of the marathon. So, like we mentioned, this is really cutting that by 50% or even more. The other strategy, though, is if you're somebody who doesn't want to fuel as frequently, we've had a lot of folks have a lot of success with taking 2 packets of UCAN at a time prior to the race and finding that those 2 packets will last them up to between miles 16 to 18, and then they'll just have to refuel that one additional time, whether it's with UCAN or with something else. So certainly something to try in your training if you're one of those folks that are like, what, I just want to get fuel in me and get out there and go and don't want to have to worry about refueling is try doubling the dose of UCAN. And you can either try doing that by consuming the 2 packets, at the same time prior to your run, or what a lot of folks will do is they'll even stagger it. Like on the morning of the marathon, they may do a protein UCAN packet about an hour and a half before, then they may do another packet of UCAN without the protein 30 minutes before, and they'll still get their 2 packets in there, and it'll last them for 3 hours, but they won't need anything else, and they're accomplishing the same thing just by staggering it. Rich, I think you alluded to doing that for your Ironman. Have you done the 2 packets of UCAN prior to a workout or a race? And if you have, what have you felt when you've done that compared to just one?
Yeah, that's usually what I do. So for a marathon, I'll add a packet into the oatmeal. Usually that's 2 to 3 hours before race start, and then I have a bottle that I'll sip on up to an hour before. And that's worked. I mean, that's all I did for Boston, and I think I hit maybe 2 water stations during the whole course. Otherwise, I didn't eat or drink anything else. Arizona this year, Ironman, I basically did the same thing, sipped on a bottle up until the swim start, and that put me through until I got onto the bike, and then I had, again, I think a bottle every 75, 90 minutes on the bike. So I was probably on the bike for a good hour before I um, really started consuming that. So for me, that's what works is doing the 2 packets before, especially on longer just runs. So running a half marathon or a marathon, I don't carry anything. I hate anything around my waist. I don't carry bottles. So I found that works for me just doing the 2 bottles before.
Gotcha. And so, I guess I want to just take 3 or 4 minutes to summarize just some of the main points that we talked about today. And Rich, I'll let you close us out. But in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them, and we'll definitely answer them. But I think for anybody who's new to UCAN, who hasn't tried it yet, the best way to really try it is I hear a lot of people telling me that they save it for their 2 hour run, but whether you're working out for an hour or 2 hours, you want to feel steady no matter what. So I think the best time to try UCAN is just 30 minutes prior to an hour workout, and really what you want to pay attention to is notice how you feel on the back end of that workout. You're not going to feel a jolt or a rush or that buzz as soon as you take UCAN, but it's really 30 minutes, 40 minutes into your workout, you still feel steady. You still feel like you could push yourself, and then over long term is when you'll notice the body composition changes. Of course, that's not going to happen overnight, but do know that you're spending more of your workout in that ideal metabolic state to burn fat. Um, Really, again, it's important. Think of UCAN as your pre-workout snack. So if you typically, if you're typically somebody that has a bagel or in the morning, if you're having that bowl of cereal, if you're having a banana before you get out the door and go, UCAN is really going to replace those things. It's a drink, it's a liquid, but it's a carbohydrate source. It's a fuel source. So really consider UCAN to be your pre-workout snack, and think of replacing some of those common pre-workout foods that you may have. Now, there's certainly no harm in eating and having UCAN at the same time, but if you're eating, you want to have it be a type of carbohydrate like maybe like oatmeal that's not going to spike your blood sugar, or you want to, a lot of folks will have eggs, some protein from the eggs, and then they'll have UCAN as the carbohydrate portion of your breakfast. So eat foods that either aren't going to spike your blood sugar or are going to be more designed to prevent hunger than foods that you perceive that you need for energy. And that's something that certainly you guys have great resources in Rich and Carlos to help you out. Making some of those smart food choices. So I'm confident they'll be able to identify those for you. And then finally, when you're having UCAN post workout, you really treat it like you would any type of recovery shake. But what you want to notice the way you feel an hour after your workout, and pay attention to your level of hunger. And then that's where you may say, hey, I feel really different in terms of my desire to eat, or the types of foods that I'm gravitating towards. You may find that what a lot of people tell us, they don't have the same cravings for sugars and carbs after a tough workout than they do with when they have UCAN, compared to like we talked about, something like chocolate milk. And finally, if you're somebody that if this has piqued your interest, but you're very used to fueling with sugars, you may not get 90 minutes to 2 hours of that steady energy the first time you try UCAN, especially if you've had it. If you're somebody that's really consuming a lot of gels in your training and during your long training, there may be a little bit of an adjustment period. Now, it's not going to be 2 or 3 months. It may simply be you need to use it 3, 4, 5 times. But really, if you want to commit to this way of fueling, and you think you want to make the switch, I would say stick with it. And initially you may find that, hey, I need a subsequent dose of UCAN every hour. And then as you train with it longer, a week later, 2 weeks later, you may say, hey, I only need it every 90 minutes now. Or initially you might say, you know what, I need 2 packets at a time, every 90 minutes. And then a few weeks later, you may say, hey, I only need one. So there's no harm, at least initially, if you need it, to either up the dose of UCAN or to shorten the time in between doses if you're going for a long period of time. That there's certainly that initial adjustment period. Rich, I'll ask you one question pertaining to that, and then if you got anything else to add before we close this out. Feel free. But have you noticed as you've used UCAN over time, any feedback on whether or not it's lasted longer for you?
It's actually, I feel like it's lasted longer than when I initially started on it. So, um, really, in all honesty, at Arizona, my goal was 75 to 90 minutes, and I went anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes, where I was feeling fuller longer, and I had the energy sources. I didn't feel like I needed to, drink as much as I had in some of the other training runs. So, and I know when I had done Louisville the year before, I really stuck to that kind of 75-minute, 90-minute area, and now as the training progressed, and I guess I used the product more, I felt like I could extend that out to sipping a bottle every 2 hours, and it didn't affect performance at all.
So that's something that I think we've just heard so consistently is as your body, like somebody like Rich, who is eating a certain way with probably not a heavy emphasis on a carb. Well, is that accurate, Rich? You probably are you eating relatively lower carb?
Uh, Low to none, to be
Low to
honest.
none.
I
Okay,
mean, fruit
gotcha.
other than maybe fruits and vegetables.
Got it. So, if you're really eating in a manner, a lot of you guys might have heard this term of metabolic efficiency. If you're eating in a manner that's encouraging the body to rely on fat as a fuel source, you'll certainly find that you're going to get longer from UCAN, a longer steadiness and energy. Now, that's not to say that you need to eat a certain way for this to work for you. NBA players who have notorious for some of the worst diets out there. McDonald's before games, things of that nature. Find that they're getting 2 hours of steady energy throughout their game, and they've been blown away. Some of the feedback we've gotten from them. So that's not to say you have to eat a certain way with UCAN, but if you train with it more, your body's going to become less reliant on sugars, and it's going to be more adapted to utilizing fat for fuel. So you'll find that it will last you longer. If you're making dietary changes around training with UCAN, like Rich is, you'll find that it'll last you even longer. So um, pay attention to those types of things too. You may find that as your diet changes, that you just don't need as much UCAN as you initially did, and a lot of that is you may feel like you don't need it, but for a lot of people, it's kind of scary to go from 300 calories an hour down to so little. So a lot of that is really making sure you train with the product so you can get that mental trust factor, because that's so tied into um, the confidence you're going to have. You need to be confident in the plan, and you need to be confident that you can get by on significantly less calories. So that's why it's very important to train with it. The final thing I've got to add is you've all received an email from me. I think inviting you to this webinar. I am in the Colfax Ambassador group on Facebook. So if you guys have any questions at any point, you've got, like I mentioned, you've got great resources in Rich and Carlos, but you can certainly feel free to reach out to me at any time. Just tag me in the Facebook group if you want to ask a question in there, or feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to chat with anybody. And locally, I know there's a big Colorado group here. You guys have a variety of options to get it out in Colorado. They're from Run Colorado to Boulder Running Company, both their stores, Denver Run House, Endurance House, Competitive Edge. Gosh, I must be leaving some Adrenaline Cycle. So really almost the majority of the stores in that area, the specialty run or try stores, do carry UCAN. And like I mentioned, there is a great opportunity also to save 20% if you want to use that O2EA code online. And if anybody for whatever reason forgets it or didn't see it in the chat, just feel free to email myself or Rich, and we can send you the code. Rich, I'm about talked out. What else do you got for us?
I think that's about it. I am any of the ambassadors. If you got questions, samples, anything like that, just let me know that as well, and we'll see what we can do. And uh, Jenny Can will be at the expo too, so we'll be able to, talk to you a little bit more come in May. If they have any more direct questions as well.
Oh, and I didn't even mention that can people get UCAN at your facility as well?
Yeah, we do have UCAN at O2EA downtown, as well as the some of the other retailers that you mentioned, Run Colorado, Competitive Edge. Those are our partner stores for O2EA, so product is available with us or there as well.
Awesome, guys. Well, again, a big thanks to everyone who joined us tonight, and we will post this recording, so it'll be available if there's anything that you missed. And yeah, look forward to hearing your feedback for anyone who's new, and for those of you who are veteran UCAN users, definitely saw a few people that said 10 plus times. Really appreciate that, and keep helping us spread the good word. With that, say good night to everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be in touch soon.
Good night.
Take care.